Welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. We're here to help develop fleet and transport professionals. Do you want to progress and develop your skills and knowledge? We promise to bring lively conversation and debate around interesting issues and keep you bang up to date with changes in our awesome industry. The Fleet Geeks are a community of professionals, and if you enjoy the podcast, why not join the discussion for free in the Fleet Geek community over on Facebook?
Oh, there we go. I can see we need a clapper board, don't we? Definitely, especially for our YouTube stuff. So red light rolling, and welcome to yet another edition of, I don't know how many. I said actually what I'm going to do. One of my little jobs that I've got on the list of things to do is to actually catalogue all the Fleet Geek stuff, because it'd be good to signpost people to various episodes. You know, if you want to listen to something about, I don't know, tachographs or something, go on to this YouTube. So I'm going to. So I don't know how many we're up to, but it must be quite a few now. And I reckon
this is going to be around 62 to 63 episodes. Yeah.
What great value for our dear listeners and viewers. Crikey me.
It's a lot of content in that.
60
a lot of
bits
content.
Content.
It's amazing how quickly it builds up, isn't it? It's amazing how quickly it builds up. Yeah. And this one we do shorter sessions, but we do them on a Monday and a Friday. So we're accumulating them at two a week. Yeah. But I like that format. I think it works well, mate.
Works well, and we do get a lot of great feedback. But it'd be nice to see some comments and what have you. And give us some suggestions of what you want covering. We've had a few suggestions for covering stuff, but we quite often choose stuff on the hoof because it's relevant, and it's like today's podcast, and the subject for today's podcast is something that hit the news. I won't say there has been one or two other big issues in the news generally this week, so I don't think this one really appeared in the news, but into those of us in the industry, it was quite big news.
Shall I read the email, Mike? Because I've just got the email up. Do you think that'd be useful?
That'd be very useful. Read
some people might not have had that email. So one of the things we'll recommend to our listeners is that to subscribe to the Office of the Traffic Commissioner. A lot of people don't realise that they have like an email platform. Obviously, there's several that we recommend. HSE is one, DVSA is another, and the OTC is another. But yeah, go onto their website and sign up for their email updates. But the email came out, is actually Thursday the 13th, so it was last week. Important message for all HGV operators. You may interesting HGV rather than passenger.
I'll explain that, yeah.
Okay, you may be aware of a recent legal decision made by the upper tribunal found here, and in particular, and there's a link to the decision, in particular paragraphs 31 to 38, where it was ruled that all goods vehicles in possession of an operator are deemed to be in use and must be authorised under the operator's licence. So that's interesting. We'll look at that again. Goods vehicles in possession of an operator are all deemed to be in use. The traffic commissioners are aware of a practice in some areas of the industry where operators have more vehicles in possession than are authorised, and operators have been specifying vehicles when carrying out a specific operation and then exchanging them on the licence for another vehicle. One example was a pallet network removing one or two rigids each evening and replacing them with articulated lorries for the overnight trunk. A less blatant but still illegal example is where an operator with a licence authorising 20 vehicles but who has 21 vehicles in their possession uses the spare vehicle as a replacement whenever one of the other 20 vehicles are being serviced or inspected. This ruling means that operators must specify all goods vehicles in their possession onto their operator's licence, even if they are not used on a public road all the time. For some operators, this will mean a variation is required as there will not be sufficient margin on their licence. You can manage your operator's licence here with the link to the goods vehicle online system, and operating centres must have sufficient capacity for all vehicles. In making the ruling, the upper tribunal has reinforced the principles of the operator licensing system, making sure that financial standing and resourcing are properly reflected and are helping to ensure that a level playing field is maintained. The traffic commissioners may consider taking regulatory action against the licence if an operator is found to have more vehicles in possession than authorised under their licence. There we go.
Yes. So, rather a sad individual that I am, I actually read the whole of that.
Did you? Mate, you're such a geek. Mike living up to his name, the Fleet Geek.
And it's. I'm trying not very well to work my way through a law degree, which I'm probably mentioned on here before. So I find stuff like this fascinating from that legal angle and what where this all come from. So just a bit of a background to where this came from. There was a decision made by a traffic commissioner against a company operating. It was actually tar spraying equipment. And anyway, this ruling was or this finding by the traffic commissioner out of public inquiry. So standard sort of fare, really for what we have to put up with in the industry. And the company in question, the organisation in question, said, we're not happy with that decision. We're going to take it to the upper tribunal, which is the process for if you're not happy with something a traffic commissioner does, and that may be an application or maybe as a result of a decision taken at public inquiry, you can take it to the upper tribunal. So this is a higher court that sits and sort of balances the findings of the traffic commissioner against you as an operator making representation to a higher court. And this ruling comes from the higher court. So it kind of, what that means is it does then set as a test case. So it becomes then not law. It isn't law. I have to make that perfectly clear. This isn't there's a new law. I've seen all the internet forums and people say there's a new law, which says it's not a new law. New law has to be made by Parliament, and good luck with that at the moment. So this is just a ruling from a higher court that will then be used as like a test case, if you like, and be used like case law. So, and it's a rather strange one, isn't it? That operators are now scratching their heads thinking, well, hang on a minute, what about my shunter that I use in the yard? It's an ex-road going vehicle that I now use in the yard to shunt around. What about those two vehicles I keep? That we replaced them last year, but we've kept them just in case, or we're cannibalising them for parts. And what are we going to do with them? Have we got to put every vehicle that we have on our licence? You're closer to the wheel sometimes than I am, Pete, with operators. Has anybody asked you any questions about this yet?
I'll be honest. I think we're quite fortunate in that we deal with areas of the market where we have operators who are largely very conscientious, and most of our operators have more authorised vehicles than they actually operate, generally speaking. However, we have had an operator which our previous colleague Jamie used to help, and he certainly had to have some robust conversations around the vehicles in possession and those authorised on their licence.
Yeah, and it was a surprise to me when I read the ruling that it was a surprise. When I read that email from the traffic commissioners, it was actually that practice. I can't believe that goes on, but maybe I've never.
It's prevalent. It's prevalent by the sounds of it. It's really prevalent in the industry.
Yeah, and that seems strange. That you'd go through the process of taking two vehicles off of a license in the evening, so that you could use another two different, two Arctics in the evening to do the trunking. That seems incredible, and I can understand why the traffic commissioners would get jittery with that. But where does that leave us then with operators that have got vehicles that they have in their possession but don't use? And once again, we have to come to this: have you got enough vehicles? Number one, have you got enough vehicles authorised on your licence? So a quick scan through that then. When we apply for an operator's licence, we apply for a theoretical amount, if you like, an authorised amount. But we don't necessarily operate that amount of vehicles. We would normally have a number of vehicles that are specified on the licence. So these will be a registration number where we get an O licence disc, and those vehicles will be specified on the licence by registration number. And we normally keep a little gap between the two, which is called the margin. And most operators will find that really useful because they can expand and contract within that margin without going to the extra issue of having additional vehicles authorised on the licence, requiring financial standing and all the rest of it. So there are drawbacks. You can't just go straight in and say, well, I'll tell you what, then I only want to operate 10 vehicles, but let's get authorisation for 100, because you have that financial standing that you have to meet on the vehicles authorised, not the vehicles specified. So, that sort of stops that kind of thing happening. And also you have to have the systems and procedures and ability to follow the rules and all the rest of it. And you might not have enough transport managers, etc., etc. So that stops operating. So the margin, generally speaking, it won't be a massive margin. It will only be, for a medium-sized operator, it will only be, 2, 3, 4 vehicles, whatever it might be. So,
hi, it's Pete from Flagship Partners. We're really proud to sponsor the Fleet Geeks podcast. Flagship Partners offer a range of consultancy and training services to ensure that our customers remain compliant and have the best possible knowledge to be able to fulfill their work. If you're interested in support with any of our safety, HR or compliance services, or you want to train to be a transport manager or need driver CPC training, give us a call today.
That's the first problem. Have we got enough vehicles authorised on our licence? Which includes the vehicles that we may not be using on the road at that time. And then, why aren't those vehicles specified on the licence? So I can see it causing it has caused some very big ripples.
Yeah, it has, absolutely.
And I don't know how you feel on or think about this. My view, and it is only my view, but I came to this view, and I'm glad that I listened to another podcast, which we won't mention because it's no point in giving extra publicity to the opposite. No, they're not really the opposition, but these people are far more learned than I am. Let's put it that way. Massively more learned than I am, and I was rather relieved the other day that this particular podcast and the contributors to it came to the same view as I did. And the view is that if the vehicles, the test would be, for me, if I was a traffic commissioner, the test would be, is that vehicle VOR? Have you declared it VOR by a SORN notice? So that genuinely would say that vehicle is not used on the road and it is either up for spares or scrap, or it's just a vehicle you may be using in the yard or whatever. For me, that would be a test, but that's not to say that's the position of a traffic commissioner. So
that's that. So therein lies a tricky one. I would certainly have to ask the question of someone more in a position of authority than I'm in to double check that. But I would say that makes sense, doesn't it? That makes sense. So essentially, if a vehicle is in your possession and is taxed for road use, has a valid road excise duty, it has an MOT, it is inspected, then that is in your possession, and therefore that should be specified on your license. You should have margin for that vehicle. Whether I think this issue is around swapping vehicles around for use on the road, and I think particularly a good example would be, so I'm going to use an example which I think seems reasonable, but I suppose I'd want to check before I gave specific advice, which is what I do. So if this company came to me for advice, my port of call would be to probably speak to my colleagues at Earned Recognition to see what their take on this position is. But I've got a really good example of a truck fest type operator, a small to medium sized family business, and I know that he collects vintage HGVs and he refurbishes them and has them painted, and they're collector's editions. And what he does is tends to loader them to events. If I believe if they are driven, they're generally speaking driven on trade plates or the such like, and they're never used for hire and reward. They're purely there just for
historical.
They're probably owned by the company, but it's like a hobby type thing that happens. Now that operator might have a a margin for 10 vehicles specified, and then they've got 4 or 5 vintage vehicles that they use to exhibit at Truckfest. I believe, from what I'm hearing, those vehicles would be sawn. They've probably not got valid MOTs on them, or whatever may be the case. I don't think we're talking about that situation, if that makes sense. I don't believe the traffic commissioner is talking about that situation, if you're thinking that is. However, what I probably would recommend is actually getting that as categoric guidance. I would probably ring and speak to a caseworker. I'd speak to the DVSA. I'd probably, if that client came on board with me, for example, that's how I would manage that situation. I would get categoric advice in that specific circumstance. But I believe the spirit of this is not targeting those people. It is targeting the people who have got essentially more vehicles in their possession that are MOT'd, taxed, ready to go, ready to use. And they're using them on a cycle basis to cover maintenance, inspections, and those kinds of things. I believe that's where this message is targeted. But certainly, if I had reason to check in because I had a client come on board, then I would certainly make sure that I'd crossed my T's and dotted my I's, so to speak.
I think again, we talk about this quite a lot on these podcasts, that people ask questions, and in the industry they believe they want something black and white, and quite often we can't tell them black and white, and even asking the DVSA, no disrespect to caseworkers and officers on the ground, they're sometimes not in a position to give black and white answers on this kind of stuff. And that's why we have the system that we do in this country, where so if that operator said, okay, well, I'm still not happy with the findings of that tribunal, there's another court. We can take it right up to the Court of Appeal. But to do that, you're going to need incredibly deep pockets to pay these, to pay barristers and things. So it's difficult, isn't it?
I think that example I've just used, just reflecting on it, because I came up with it on the hoof. Reflection, I think that'd probably be an email to the caseworker.
Yeah, with a note something in your hand.
With a note to follow up in a couple of weeks. We've notified the caseworker that this is the case, what we do. And we've given them opportunity to respond. And asked, do we need to increase? That email would say something along the lines of, based on this email, do you need us to increase our operator's license? In which case we'll need to review that in a business point of view. I'd probably take that route, send it to them. I imagine that would get referred up to, whoever the caseworker would speak to, their line manager or what have you. And I imagine an answer would come back, which I'd probably then just keep. That would be my evidence for future. As a diligent operator, we checked. This came out.
We make steps, don't we? We take steps to check and to see if we can get some sort of semblance of order. But it's one to keep our eye on. It's interesting that the traffic commissioners felt it necessary to jump on it kind of straight away and say, well, this is what we're going to do now, because we've now got the backing of a court. We've now got the backing of a tribunal. We've now got the backing of a tribunal. So we can now do this. Look, cup of tea coming in. Look, thank you very much.
Look at that,
not
mate.
Bad service, eh? It's just getting better, obviously. Yeah. We've now got the backing of a court, and they felt it necessary to jump on that. But it's interesting when we see the forums and people say, "Oh, have you heard the new law?" Well, it isn't a new law. It's just a certain way. Interesting, that case, the company, the upshot of it is that their tar sprayers, they were arguing, were out of scope, and I believe actually the train of thought is that they are actually out of scope. It's just they were wrongly sort of classified as being in scope, but now they've kind of gone back out of scope now. So it wouldn't have been necessary. All this wouldn't have been necessary, but it is what it is. We are where we are, as they say, and now the traffic commissioners have got another thing. But having said that, sticking up for the traffic commissioners, I didn't appreciate that sharp practice does go on in the industry. And I think everybody can see the silliness of that. That's just ridiculous.
I think it's a great move. I think it's a great move to clarify the position. When as hearings occur and evidence is gathered, and previous cases are able to be applied in practice. I think that's a great practice to email occasionally and clarify positions. It creates a bit of a conversation, and it provides clarity.
I always say when I'm doing refresher training or OLAT training or anything like that to operators, and directors OLATs is a good one as well. When we do a directors OLAT, I always say to those people with control in the business, to transport managers, directors, the like, I always say a really good starting place for any audit on your company is count the number of vehicles you've got in your yard and then look at your O license. Is there a disparity between the two? Because if there is, you need to put it right. And I think that's actually a really good catalyst for, you'd be surprised, some people, what happens with big companies, big organizations, even, I say multinational, but national organizations, they'll, for example, they'll shut the Bristol branch. And what they'll do is they'll move 2 vehicles from the Bristol branch to the Northampton branch. Because they think, well, we don't want to sell the vehicles, or we're still paying the lease on them, so let's move them to a branch that's still open. And then all of a sudden, what you find is you've got this like mission creep, and all of a sudden, your 10 operators, your 10 vehicles at Northampton have become 12 because you've taken these 2 in from a branch that's closed. And quite often operators can fall foul of those numbers. By not realising, by just this sort of creep of general stuff. So I always say, good starting point for any audit, just count the number of vehicles you've got against your operator's licence, and the two really need to match. So buses, I'm going to get the last. I'm going to get the last one on buses. So why is it different for buses? It is slightly different for buses because, interestingly, it's kind of one or two things are coming into my mind now that have sort of fallen into place, maybe for a different day, another day. But because I'm always interested in the historic, why we get where we are. And this makes sense to me now. So buses, on a bus operator's license, you don't need to specify vehicles. So in the bus world, your operator's licenses are transferable. Not your operator's licenses, your operator license discs are transferable between vehicles. So you keep a pool of vehicles and you just transfer the discs as necessary. So you don't, there's no need to specify vehicles. Having said that, you still need to have an authorised amount of vehicles. So, it doesn't really affect the bus world as much as it will do the truck world. But that's why but why, so if bus operators' license discs are transferable, why not trucks? And I've always thought, I didn't really know the answer to that question, but I think I do now, but that's for another day, I think.
Okay, look at that cliffhanger. Well, we'll do our little YouTube bit now that we're reading our book. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the comment. Oh, by the way, Tony Stott, if you're listening, thank you for the comments. Mike, we need to go in and respond to Tony. He comments on our videos and we need to make sure.
Excellent stuff. Well done. Spanish Tony, well done.
Yeah, we love you, Spanish Tony. Big shout out to Spanish Tony.
Hasta la vista, baby. Yeah.
Yeah. And enjoy the Corona. But so hit the subscribe button, comment, like, share, and we'll see you on the next one.
Brilliant. See you on the next one. Fine.
See you later.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share with your friends and colleagues too. Join us for free on Facebook with the Fleet Geeks community for transport and fleet managers. Fleet Geeks offers ongoing professional development, networking and mentoring too. So get in touch with me, Pete Rushmer, on any social media platform to find out more.